This is going to be a short video, the first one on Razor Pages. This year we are using GitHub Classroom for the first time, and I've set up 7 assignments for you to complete. One of them is the Git fundamentals, which you probably hardly need. The other is your team project, which you won't start till later. And then we've got 2 Contoso tutorials, one on MVC, one on Razor, and 2 movies tutorials, one on Razor and one on MVC. But we're going to start with this simple Razor currency converter just to get you started. So you can see which are individual assignments and which are group assignments. And we're using GitHub Classroom to keep track of your work and to mark your work. So what I want you to do to start with is create an empty ASP Razor Currency Converter repository. I'm going to do that by asking you to go to Blackboard, Session 2, the session plan, and click on this GitHub Classroom link, which should take you to a page looking like this, where I need you to find your particular name. I'm going to pick on Andre as I recognize him. I won't actually do it, but click on that, and then are you sure? So please make sure that it is you. You've chosen the right person before you say OK. And that will then create you an empty GitHub repository similar to this one I've just created for myself. It should start something like PNU550 ASP Razor Currency Converter - your name. It's empty. Okay, I know we haven't done this before, but we're going to create projects from scratch this year. Okay, so here we are in Visual Studio, and we are going to create a new project. What we're looking for is a C#, Windows if you're using Windows, otherwise obviously Mac if you're using Mac, and we're looking for web. So what we're looking for is not the MVC one, we are looking for a Razor Pages core web application. So I'm selecting that one. The other one we're going to look at later is this MVC one. We're going to look at both of them, and you're going to choose which one you like for your project. Okay, so please choose a name for the project similar to the name of your repository. So I'm going to call it Razor Currency Converter. And I'm going to put it, I think I'll move it into Drive D, and I've got some 550 projects folder there. Okay, now this place solution and project in the same directory is okay if you're just dealing with single project solutions, which we are. So you might want to try that. Normally I would leave it unticked, because typically you'll have more than one project in a solution, but this is just a simple starter, so you might want to try that for a change. I do want you to be using the latest version, or the one that I hope is still very recent when you come to do it, version 5. And like the other video, we're not going to use accounts this time, individual accounts. We'll have no authentication this time. We will configure HTTPS, we won't enable Docker. Don't know what this does, but you can enable it if you like. And this is what you end up with. I'm going to have to try to move that sometime. So I won't go through in detail, as you've probably seen from other videos. What's particular about Razor Pages is the Pages folder, where it has files which end in CSHTML, which is a mixture of C# and HTML. So you've got 3 pages here. You've got an index page, which if you look at it doesn't have a lot in it. Has a div with an H1 saying welcome, and we'll leave that. Let's have welcome to Razor Pages, shall we? So we know we're dealing with Razor Pages, and here's a link you might want to follow to find out more about that. Okay, so you can see we can run it using II Express or by clicking on the project name. Or the other way we can do it is in the web by using the web browser, which I tend to use when you're making changes to the HTML side. But the key thing about Razor Pages is every CS HTML file has a code behind file. So you can see here's the index CS_HTML, here's the index CS_HTML.cs, which has at the moment a logger in it and very little else, but we'll come back to that in a minute. Let's just make sure it runs. Let's just try II Express to start with. Now, I haven't found a way around this. This is a problem. We want an SSL certificate. I ask for one and say yes, please install it, but it'll ask again the next time I run. I don't know quite. I'm hoping somebody can find a solution to that, because that's just very irritating. I've got two screens, so my output's gone to my second screen, so I've moved it over, and we can see there we are. There's our welcome to Razor Pages. As I say, we've got a privacy page and a home page and the name of the project. Again, we've got a slight problem with security, which I'm hoping we can sort out at some point. I'll close that. The other way of running it is with the Kestrel, which is a built-in web server, which brings up a command window, which you'll see in a minute. So we've got the same result, but we're using a different web server. The final way you can do it is right-click on the file and view it in a browser. I find the advantage of that is you can change the HTML while it's still up. Save it, go back to the page, refresh, and there we go. Slightly quicker than having to start the run from scratch. Okay, so at this point we have a Razor Pages minimal project up and running with 2 pages, although it doesn't do anything yet. Okay, I have just drilled down into www.root, which contains what are called static files, including the Bootstrap CSS and the Bootstrap JavaScript files here. I've opened the Bootstrap CSS and found that it is a rather old version, 4.3.1, so be careful of that when you go to the Bootstrap site, which you'll need to do if you want to make your projects, any of the projects, look decent. For this particular project it doesn't matter, you won't lose hardly any marks if you do a crude input form, but I think we should start as we mean to go on and use Bootstrap to get this form to look half-day recent. Okay, but we have just started this project now and we need to get it under Git. So I'm going to close this down for the moment and go to Git changes. Now, it's not very clear. We don't want to clone a repository because our repositories are empty. But we want to create a repository. I'm going to try that one. So obviously you need to be signed in. That is my local path, and it's looking for my repository name. I was expecting it to come up with a list, but it hasn't done that. Just hang on a second, I'm going to check. And where's the... that's the name I want. I want that name, don't I? When I go back to Visual Studio, let me just check. No, that's not the right name, is it? Why can't I get a drop-down list? I can go to existing remote. Yep, so that's a local. Gone to existing remote, and it now requires a URL, which I can get if I go back to GitHub. Okay, so I'm going to, in the root, I'm going to copy that URL. Paste it in there, and I can create and push. Never done that before. So I'm creating and pushing. Where's the messages? Down the bottom there, right at the bottom. Down here you can see, is it finished? I don't know, I'm going to go to GitHub and see in the browser. I'll refresh this page. Yes! Excellent, there we go. We have all our project files up in our empty repository now. And we're up and running in Git and GitHub. Excellent. I like that. The first thing I want you to do with every project is to personalize it. So the very first page we're going to go to is in the Pages folder, and it's in the Shared Pages folder. You have a master layout page which will be used, or can be used, with every other page. Well, let's open it and you can see what it contains. It contains the headings to link in the style sheets. You've got Bootstrap as the main style sheet, but you can modify this small style sheet. I think this is produced by Microsoft. I tend not to use it, but if you want to, where is it? Yeah, there it is, the www CSS site.cs. So I haven't looked at that. You can play around with that. If you want to change it, don't know what it does, so I'll leave that up to you. Okay, but what I want though is the layout page. So we go back to the layout page. First of all, you've got the title. Obviously by default it is the same name as your project, but in terms of being a title, it would be more readable if it has spaces in it. So I'm going to put spaces in it. Okay, now here's your menu. Typically in ASP.NET or in websites generally, you use unordered lists with list items for the menu. So you can see here we've got a home, link to a home page and link to a privacy page. That's what appears in the menu: home, the word home, and privacy. Now for more complicated projects you have got areas you can define, and you may want, for your project, the team project, you may want to have a user area and a staff area, for example, but we don't want that for this project. So that's all we need at the moment. We can work with these two pages. But obviously on more complicated examples you can extend this menu by copying these list items and changing their names accordingly. It's the footer I want you to personalize, please. So you're going to put the spaces in, and what you've got at the moment is a copyright notice for this project and a link to the privacy page. That's all there is in the footer. I want a bit more than that. Let's just see what the footer looks like again. Let me remind myself, what does the footer look like? I'm going to try Don't Ask Me Again, because I'm getting tired of this message, which doesn't help us one jot. Sorry, yes, I have got a bit of a form got here, but I'll take you through that in a minute. What I'm concerned about is down there, look. There's our copyright notice. It just says 21 Razer currency converter and the privacy link. We're not terribly interested in the privacy link, so what I'm going to do is stop the run, because I've run it, haven't I? I will next use the browser next time. So I think what I'll do is, I don't think we need the link to the privacy. We don't need this link at all, do we? That can come out. And what I suggest we have instead is, that is the name of the project. I'm going to put it here, I'm going to use, no, I'm alright. Let's just try, vertical line is typically used to separate items in the footer. So I've used a vertical line there. I would like your name in full, please, and your 8-digit student ID. Then let's have the module. And then let's have the assessment. This is a logbook, isn't it? This is for the logbook. Let's try that. So this time I'm going to save that first, and then open the index page in the browser. So obviously if you run it every time, what happens is just what happened here, which is you have to readjust the size of the page every time. Okay, so we've got Razy Current, Derek Peacock, yep, it all just fits in. You might want to go to 2 lines if it's going to be, I mean that's probably the size we wanted, in which case the footer is too long now. That's a minor thing. Let's split that into 2, shall we? Okay, but otherwise I want your name here because that's easier to read. Put your full details down here in the footer, because that'll occur in every page. So let's demonstrate altering that without having to rerun. Let's go and where's the footer gone? Here. So I think what we'll do is have 2 paragraphs, shall we? So in one paragraph we'll have the have those 2 items. It looks more than 4. What happened there? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, we don't need that because we're going to go for a second paragraph now. As we're going to go on a mobile phone, we'll have to go down. Let's save that and switch back to our output page. Oh, it's too much, isn't it? There's too much spacing and it's not centered, is it? Okay, this is the kind of fiddling around with, what have we got? The footer is just border top muted text. Actually, I'm not keen on the muted text because I want to be able to read it more easily. So I'm going to take that out, and instead I'm going to put text center. Let's center the text. And I think that will look better. But the paragraphs are giving us too much space. So instead, I'll just use a line break. We'll just have a line break. Let's try that. Save that. Oops, save that. Go to the page. Refresh. Yeah. Still looks a lot of space, but I'm happy with that. I'm not going to fiddle around anymore. That'll do me, okay? So that'll... you're going to do that kind of editing on every project. Why is it making such a noise? Every project that you do for the logbook and for the team project, please. The team project obviously will have more names. Your 3 team members. You might want to produce a team page where you give the details of the team in a better, easier to read form. Now what we're aiming on, I've already got it. I'm sorry, I've copied this from Bootstrap. I'll show you how to do that in a minute. But let me just save all this by going to Git Changes and just put a message in to say we've updated the layout page. With my name. Okay, and we're going to commit all and push. One minor thing here, I've not laid this out in a standard way. You should be able to select it and format selection. There we go. Okay, I'm still not happy with the spacing here, and I have found the reason. The site.css we looked at, it had 60 pixels there, and I've changed it to 30. Now how I found that out was by using Google. So if I run this again, okay, and what you can do in Google is to inspect. I'll do it on a large screen because we can see over here the code. So if you scroll down to where this footer is, you can open it out, open out the div. And obviously the div is giving us the formatting, and then you can look down and see what formatting's been applied. Quite a lot of formatting has been applied, and I think somewhere, yes, it was there. It was 60 pixels, I've changed it to 50, but you can see the result down here. So one of the things you can do with Google Inspector is to sort of take something off. If we take that off, you can see now there's no space between the lines, which I think I might prefer. So one option is to take it off, but you can try things out and play with the formatting there. The next point was, I had copied this from Bootstrap, and I'll show you that in a minute, but I didn't like the way these were centered, the labels were centered. So again, you can go up and find it. There's the form. Okay, so there's the form, and then here are the form groups. So if we drill down, we can see that the label is in a column, small column 2. Yes, but there, the whole form is inside a div with class text centered. That's what it's doing. It's there, that's the problem. So it's that text centered business there, which again we can probably find somewhere. But anyway, I'm going to take that text centering out. So if I go to the code here in the index page, we can see there's the text centering. Look, we can just sort of take that out. And if we do that and save the page and refresh this, there we go. Okay, to me that looks, actually I prefer that was I was happy with that centered. I wasn't happy with the other. Actually, I'm going to change it. I'll have the let's have the titles centered, but this not. So if we go back here, I'll put it back. Sorry, let me undo that then. But when it comes to the form, the form here, I think what we'll do here is text left. To have text left. Let's save that and try again. Refresh again. Yep, there we go. So that's centered and that's left. Okay, but where did I get this form from? Well, I got that from getbootstrap.com. By default, it's going to be in the latest version. God, it's not there, is it? So if I go to documentation, you can see it's in Bootstrap 5.1. Now the nearest we've got, because we haven't got 4.3, which is what Microsoft are using, we have 4.6, so that'll be the nearest. And what we're looking for is forms. So if you go to try layout, there it is. It's in components, so there's forms. Okay, and you can see here's an example with an email address and password, and all you have to do is copy this if you wanted to have an email and password. It is a bit complicated, but essentially each part of the form needs to be in a div with the class form group. You then have a label for the form element, in this case the email address, and then you have an input, in this case type email. It's a form control and it has to have an ID, and the area described by is there for you to help accessibility. So you can just copy an example form, which is what I've done, and then just amend it. There are some more examples down here for you. Okay, so that's where I've got that code from. Okay, this module was devised for web forms, and in the learning outcomes and in the module descriptor it all talks about web forms. So I'm going to spend some time now changing the HTML, because this is being copied from Bootstrap and I'd like to improve it. So I'm okay with the idea that we're going to wrap this whole page up in a div. Remember, it is only the main center of the page. The header and the footer are in the layout page. But I don't like the idea of putting a class text center for everything. I'm going to take that out. And also, it's not good practice to have a heading and a subheading. They need to be grouped. So there is a new tag called header, will do, I think. And here's where, just in the header, we could have our centered text. So here we've got our two headings, level 1 and 2, and they can be centered. Then we come to our form. I don't know why we need 2 line breaks. Let's take them out and see what it is. Now I'm going to comment this form out for the moment. Just comment it all out. And let's do it from scratch. Yes, you have to start with a form tag. And yes, we must have a method equals post. We must post the form. And if we're going to post the form, we do need a submit button. So that's at the bottom of the form. So there's several ways of doing this, but this has been done using a button tag. Type is submit, and then the bootstrap. Let's take the bootstrap classification out. Let's have a straightforward button. Okay. And then we've got the fields themselves. Each should have a label. So let's just see what happens if we just do it simply. We'll have a label. And I want you to have a name as the first input element. And then I'll copy this line because that line wasn't too bad. There is an input, a text box. I'll leave the class out for the moment, and we'll just give it a name. As it's the name field, the name for it should be name. No problem with that. Except I think in HTML, I might have to come back to that. Whether it's lowercase or uppercase, not sure. HTML is lowercase. C# might require it to be uppercase. Let's come back to that. So there's one label. Then we can have another label. I want your email address. That's the next label. And then we want an input for the email address. So I'm going to copy this one and put it there. You're probably already anticipating what's wrong with this. Okay, actually we want it validated as an email, so it should have been type. There is a type for email, and therefore we may as well name this HTML element email. So that would be a simple-minded approach to, that's as simple as the form could get, isn't it? Let's see what that actually looks like. We save that and run it. You can probably anticipate it's not going to look particularly good. Here it is. It's just one after the other, isn't it? But it's fine. There isn't any marks for how it looks as far as the logbook examples are concerned. The marks are for the coding and understanding the technology. However, I'm showing you Bootstrap and how to make things look more professional in Bootstrap because of your project. There will be marks in your project for it looking good. So let's practice it now. Okay, so it's all in one line and not particularly good. If we try to resize it to a mobile phone size, what happens? Well, actually it looks perhaps better on a mobile phone. But look, oh dear, what happens? That kind of thing. We don't want that kind of thing happening, do we? Okay. So that's easy to do, and typically most people use divs, but I don't understand that, because if we want these on different lines, what's wrong with a paragraph? We could have these two in one paragraph, and these two in another paragraph. And then finally the button itself in a paragraph. And I think paragraph has a more clear meaning than div. I don't like div. Let's just save that and refresh and see what that looks like. There we go. Okay, I don't think that looks too bad, except that they don't quite line up, do they? But we can put a name in, and we can put a valid email address in. I try to register that. You see, it recognises. This is just HTML recognising that's not a valid email address, whereas it should be happy with that. Yep, it is. Okay, the data has gone somewhere, but we haven't done anything with it. But obviously it's right on the left hand side. There is no gap here. So what we want is to move that sort of out a bit, don't we? And that's where these columns in Bootstrap can come in. So we can use a Bootstrap class. I think it was Core550. This column business always works in 12s. So if you say column small 12, that means the entire width of the device, of a small device. If it's column small 2, it'll be kept within a small region of 2. So let's try SM2 for that. And then, yes, and do the same here then. Except that here it needs to be bigger, because there's, we want a text box. So that's why I think they use col SM4. And here we can have SM2 again. Let's see what difference that makes. Okay, and you see the spacing is better now, isn't it? But I think I'm going to put the 2 line breaks in because I would like more of a gap here. Obviously one way around that is to have some style for the header here. You could say headers always have a bottom margin, for example, couldn't you? So you could cure that by some CSS. I'm just going to use a line break then, put the 2 line breaks back, just to give it that space. And I'd be reasonably happy with that. What I'm going to say, there is more information you can add for a label. You can say what the label is for. The label is for the name field. I don't know what difference that makes. Let me just try it. The label is for the email field. Does that make any difference? But I think I would like this centered. Can we do that? Looks a bit odd on this on the edge there, doesn't it? So if we, okay, I fiddled around with it for ages, and I'll show you what I've done. But here we've got 2 possibilities. Here this is using standard layout and a bit of Bootstrap to get the blue button. This is using Bootstrap. But obviously you can have a mixture. But let me show you what I've done. I've used this class called MX Auto, which centers the whole form in 200 pixels. That's the only thing I'm not happy about, having a fixed pixel width. It's not good practice. But anyway, it did the job for me. Otherwise I haven't changed anything. Apart from the button type, I've used Bootstrap here for button primary, which gives me a blue button. If you want a green button, it's BTN success, and a red button is BTN danger, and so on. So you can get coloured buttons there. But this whole form is centered. That MX means margin automatic. Automatic left and right margins in a width of 200. Whereas here is the standard Bootstrap way of doing things, which is to put each of the form elements into a form group. So I'm using a div. Then there's the label, and it has control label in the class name. And it has another div for the input text box. Again, that's a class form control. It makes the text boxes a bit, I think they've got padding on them, I think, extra padding. The names could be lowercase again if we wanted. come back to that in a minute. And then the email's the same. I'm surprised though it's done type equals text, because if we want email validation, that should be type equals email. But we can change that. And then a form group for the button with column offsets, which don't seem to have much particular effect. So I don't mind which you use to get your layout looking reasonable. But we spent a good 10 minutes there trying to get the form looking reasonable. And we'll stop there and we'll move on to the most important part, is to get the form doing something with the data. You may be wondering where the C# comes in. What I haven't mentioned so far is that this index file is index.cs.html, not HTML. It contains C# and HTML. The only bit of C# is up here, look. Starts with the @ symbol. So we say we're using a razor page, and we say we're using this index model. And here is where we're setting the title to home page. That is all C#. But what makes razor pages unique is that behind every CS.html file is a CS file. So underneath index.cs.html there is index.cs.html.cs, which is this file here, which is largely empty at the moment. The key thing is that it's a class. So I got that the wrong way around, isn't it? Sorry, this class is based on page model and is called index model. It's called index model, but it inherits from page model. Has a logger in, but I'm not going to go into that. Key things are it can get and it can post. At the moment it can't post, but we can cure that quite quickly by creating a post as well. Typically there are two methods in these pages, a get and a post. The get is used before the page is is displayed, and when you click on the submit button it comes back to the post. You post back. Okay, but we haven't got any data yet, have we? Apart from this logger. I think I'll call it, I'm going to have a string, we'll call it first name. So you're typically used to that kind of way of declaring a public property called first name in C# with an ability to get and set it. And then of course we can set a value to first name. So we now have a first name in the code behind file, the C# behind the index CS.html. So if we go back to the index page, I'll move them around like that, I think. Right, it was saying Core Razor Pages by Derek Peacock, wasn't it? So instead of Derek Peacock, we could now say by at model dot, and then we have access to first name. Okay, and if we run that, okay, it's not happy. Don't need a dot there. Need a dot there. Thank you. Okay, if we run that there, if I build that, okay, we can now see that the first name has been passed from the code behind page, from the code behind class, sorry, to the web page. But what we want is for them to put a name in here and an email address in here, click on the button, and that information to be passed back to the code behind file. In order to do that, we are going to have to go and annotate this. We're going to have to make this a bind property, so it can be bound to a form. That allows it to be changed in the view in front, the page view, and passed back to this page. So we should be able to get access to it here. You may be wondering where the C# comes in. What I haven't mentioned so far is that this index file is index.cshtml, not HTML. It contains C# and HTML. The only bit of C# is up here, look. Starts with the @ symbol. So we say we're using a razor page, and we say we're using this index model. And here is where we're setting the title to home page. That is all C#. But what makes razor pages unique is that behind every CSHTML file is a CS file. So underneath index.cshtml there is index.cshtml.cs, which is this file here, which is largely empty at the moment. The key thing is that it's a class based on index model, and it's called page model. It's a page model class. So I got that the wrong way around, isn't it? Sorry, this class is based on page model and is called index model. It's called index model, but it inherits from page model. Has a logger in, but I'm not going to go into that. Key things are it can get and it can post. At the moment it can't post, but we can cure that quite quickly by creating a post as well. Typically there are two methods in these pages, a get and a post. The get is used before the page is is displayed, and when you click on the submit button it comes back to the post. You post back. Okay, but we haven't got any data yet, have we? Apart from this logger. I think I'll call it, I'm going to have a string, we'll call it first name. So you're typically used to that kind of way of declaring a public property called first name in C# with an ability to get and set it. And then of course we can set a value to first name. So we now have a first name in the code behind file, the C# behind the index CSHTML. So if we go back to the index page, I'll move them around like that, I think. Right. It was saying Core Razor Pages by Derek Peacock, wasn't it? So instead of Derek Peacock, we could now say by @ model dot, and then we have access to first name. Okay, and if we run that, Okay, it's not happy. Don't need a dot there. Need a dot there. Thank you. Okay, if we run that there, if I build that. And let's run that page. Okay, we can now see that the first name has been passed from the code behind page, from the code behind class, sorry, to the web page. But what we want is for them to put a name in here and an email address in here, click on the button, and that information to be passed back to the code behind file. In order to do that, we are going to have to go and annotate this. We're going to have to make this a bind property, so it can be bound to a form. That allows it to be changed in the view in front, the page view, and pass back to this page. So we should be able to get access to it here. So the key thing about Razor Pages is that every page, that is the HTML part, has behind it a class, a C# class. So you can see index has an index, CS, HTML, CS, and the privacy page has similar. Okay, now you'll notice up here that we actually are using Microsoft ASP.NET Core MVC. What's the difference? Well, I've just mentioned one difference. The other difference is this is referred to, it is a model, it contains data. It's referred to as a view model. So instead of MVC, we are using a design pattern called MVVM, model view model. This is a view model, a model for a view. Okay, what is missing is the controller part, the C part. There's no controller here. And the MVC, there is a controller. Okay, I'm just going to make a small change, sorry. I think we'll call this a full name. I didn't want to use name for it because the name of things and name are the same word, so let's call that a full name. So I've added something to the onPost method, onPost event handler, which is going to check whether there is something in the name other than spaces. And if it is null, or if it is just spaces, then we're going to use this dictionary view data. That's a made-up name. You can call that what you like. But obviously when you use it, it needs to be the same name. So typically that should be a constant, and so should that really, but just for simplicity I won't bother now. That message is then passed down in the view data to the view. I mean, I call it a view because MVC calls it a view. It is the page in Razor Pages. I don't know why Razor Pages couldn't have called it a view as well. Page and view are synonymous in my mind. Okay, so let's just try that. We should be able to put a name in the text box now, post it to here, and let's see what happens. Oh, I haven't linked it. I haven't linked it to the form yet, have I? No, we can't do that yet. Okay, so now we need to link it to this input here. And previously we had a name associated with this element just called name. I'm taking that out because instead of that I'm doing ASP4. That's a new tag helper. It's called a tag helper. It's a tag that's available for ASP.NET, and we can say that we know that this is going to be providing data for full name. So that's how we link it. Obviously we've got nowhere to put the email yet, but let's just see how that goes. Oh yep, sorry, that's right. I've changed that name, haven't I? Full name. Okay, so we're ready. Remember that's a C#, starts with that, so that's C#. If you want more than one thing, you can open a brace after the @ and put multiple lines of C# in there. Okay, let's just see what that does. Okay, so at the moment we've got Derek in the name box. Let's change the name, okay, and click on the button. Doesn't seem to have done anything. Now perhaps we need a valid email address. No, doesn't seem to be working. Great. So I've changed this to full name now, and I've set a default value for it here, just to show you that normally you wouldn't do that, but just to show you can pass it down into the form to start with if you want to. And then if it's posted, when the submit button is clicked, the blue register button, it'll come here, and you could check whether the string is null or is full of white space. If it is, you can then send a message back to the view using the view data dictionary. That's just a made up name which you have to use in the other side, and then you can reset the full name. Or if it isn't, if the name has some letters in it or has some value, then you can come here and register the name. We won't bother doing that. So again, the message is passed back to the view through the view data dictionary. Okay, so in the page what I've done is add one paragraph down the bottom here, where I'm just in a paragraph I'm just displaying the view data message. So if you look at that, you can see that if I start off with it empty and click the button, I get anonymous. Let's change the name. We know it by default it's Derek. Let's change it to Gita. Yep, there we go. We've got Gita, and also the message saying the name is registered. Go back to being empty. We get the name anonymous, and we get a message saying the name is missing. We can change it again. But what isn't happening is there's no email address there. It's accepting this registration without an email address, and it's accepting this without a name, and I don't think that's good website design. So I'd like to show you something else you can use from HTML5 then to get around that. That is to go back to your form and your input and start using more of the HTML5 that's available. So for example, you have a required field which you can add. So if you add a required field, if we save that, that's not worked. Okay, is it going to be required equals yes? So Sorry, I haven't done this for a while. Is it required true or required yes? Yeah, there we go. Required equals true. Now it's required. It doesn't go to the back page, and we'll have to put a name in now. So we don't need that data validation in the class itself, because we can do it using HTML5. So I honestly think it's better to use HTML5 because it's done instantly, no processing required, done using HTML, not C#. And we can do the same for the email address and say that is also required. And I also like what I call placeholders as well, just to give the user more feedback. So we can have a placeholder for that. I save that. We've now got to grayed out your full name as a placeholder, and I like that. So now we can't submit this form until we have a name. And we have an email address. This email address doesn't necessarily exist, but it is a valid email address. You'll have to write code to check whether it actually exists and messages can be sent to it. And now we can submit. Okay, so I've shown you all the code you need, I think, for the first part, the first logbook, the first bit of coding we want to do. We've used Razor Pages. We haven't used the database yet, so it is more complicated when we move on to databases. But one of the key things I've introduced you to is this data annotation. That's a simple data annotation, binding this C# variable to a form. But there are other ways when you come to your database of putting your full data validation as data annotations, saying a full name is required, a full name has to be at least 5 characters, and so on. You can specify a lot in what are called data annotations, and I'll show you that in another session. But you think I've shown you enough. Let's just stop here.